cold expanse of space lay silent, an ever-stretching sea of blackness punctuated only by the gleaming stars far beyond. Zara Uvri stared out of the observation window of her personal cruiser as it drifted through the void. The serenity of space, so stark and infinite, was juxtaposed by the turmoil inside her mind. She had learned something that shook her to her core. Her normally steady hands tightened around the controls as her ship smoothly adjusted course. She couldn't believe it at first. It was a whisper, a faint signal from an unlikely source, but it was clear now. Human children had been taken, imprisoned, on a Goliath-controlled facility. Zara Uvri was no stranger to the Goliath Coalition's shadowy dealings. As a high-ranking officer of the Zalvian people, she had long known of the Coalition's ruthless pursuit of power. For centuries they had sought to control the galaxy's lesser species, bending them to their will. The Goliath believed in survival of the fittest, in keeping those they deemed weak subjugated. But this was different. Humans, young, innocent children, held captive in a faraway facility, their fates sealed by cold, calculating hands. This was not about the war for resources. This was not about the struggle for political dominance. This was about something else entirely, something more sinister. Zara's thoughts flashed back to the first time she had heard rumors of the abductions. Her people, the Zalvians, had always maintained an empathetic bond with life, be it their own species, the many other sentient beings across the galaxy, or even lesser creatures. To the Zalvians, the act of taking a child, especially one so young, was unforgivable. It was an act of cruelty that Zara could not ignore, not when her heart cried out for justice. The data had come from a source she trusted, a former Goliath scientist who had defected years ago. He had promised her the truth, and now the truth was staring her in the face. The Goliath Coalition had crossed a line they should never have approached. Zara leaned forward in her seat, punching in the coordinates to the remote sector of space where the research facility was located. The Hades sector, a place few ever ventured. It was a sector of space shrouded in darkness, filled with unknown anomalies and treacherous regions of empty space. But it was also a place where the Goliath had long been experimenting with technologies far beyond the comprehension of most species. The rumors of twisted experiments, forbidden knowledge, and the weaponization of life itself were too numerous to ignore. Her jaw clenched. Zara had always understood that the Goliath were dangerous, but this was something far worse. Children, human children, were not just being taken for study. They were being imprisoned, held against their will, subjected to something even worse than death. Forced transformation. Zara had faced the Goliath before. She had seen their cruelty, their intelligence, and their cold precision. She knew that the Coalition's thirst for power was insatiable, but to hurt children? To imprison them for their own experiments? Zara couldn't allow it. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the controls, guiding her ship deeper into the Hades sector. The unspoken truth gnawed at her insides. She wasn't just fighting for justice anymore. This was personal. These were children, innocent children, and she would not let them suffer. As Zara's ship sliced through the vastness of space, she thought about the young ones in that facility. She pictured their faces, bright eyes, hopeful hearts. She imagined the shock they must have felt when they were taken from their homes, from their families, to be locked away in a cold, alien facility. What would they have seen? What could they have possibly done to deserve such a fate? The steady hum of her ship's engines was the only sound as Zara entered the outer limits of the Hades sector. There was no going back now. She was committed to this mission. Soon the dark outline of the facility appeared on her scanner, an enormous metallic structure suspended against the inky blackness. The research station loomed like a dark fortress in the center of the sector, surrounded by layers of alien technology, shields, and an array of security systems designed to keep out intruders. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. She had read about these kinds of systems before. multi-layered and highly advanced, but nothing could deter her now. Her ship shuddered as she approached, a series of cloaking devices activating to keep her hidden from prying eyes. Zara had to be stealthy. This mission would require precision and silence. She could not afford to be detected. As she neared the station, her mind raced. The Goliath's guards would be everywhere, the station's security would be ruthless, but Zara was no stranger to covert operations. She had successfully infiltrated enemy strongholds before, often with less preparation and more dangerous odds. This, however, was different. She wasn't just infiltrating an enemy base, she was coming to rescue children. With the station now directly ahead, Zara made her move. She deactivated her ship's main engines, allowing the ship to coast silently toward one of the back docking ports. Her heart thudded as the ship slowly came to a halt, perfectly positioned behind the facility. She breathed in deeply, steadying herself. The docking port was guarded, but Zara had anticipated that. She activated her ship's cloaking device, rendering it almost invisible to the station's sensors. As she carefully maneuvered toward the airlock, her eyes flickered to the faint glow of the station's security cameras on her external monitors. Each one was positioned to cover different sectors of the station. She couldn't afford to trigger any alarms. Her pulse quickened as she initiated the lockdown override codes she'd prepared beforehand. She had a limited amount of time before the Goliath realized something was wrong. Zara opened the airlock, slipping into the heart of the station. The metallic scent of the air greeted her as she stepped onto the cold floors of the facility. The silence was deafening. Zara's boots echoed in the emptiness. She was in, but now came the hard part, finding the children and getting them out. The hallways were narrow and the walls were lined with strange alien symbols that Zara didn't quite recognize. The station's lighting was dim, casting long shadows in every corner. It felt deserted. Unnaturally so, but Zara knew better than to trust appearances. The Goliath were masters of hiding in plain sight. She moved swiftly, darting between corridors, staying out of sight, her steps muffled by the thick carpeted flooring. Her scanner beeped as she moved through the facility, confirming her suspicions. The children were being held in a high-security sector, one that was heavily guarded. Zara could see them now through the faint glowing interface of her scanner, small, helpless, imprisoned within transparent cells that looked more like holding chambers than anything resembling a place of safety. Her heart clenched in her chest. There were at least a dozen children, all looking pale, malnourished, their eyes wide with fear. Some were shaking, others were crying silently. Zara's gut twisted in disgust. They were so young, too young to be locked away in this nightmare. Her fingers flew across the controls of her wrist pad, sending out a silent distress signal to her allies. She would need backup. A slight sound behind her made her freeze. Zara spun on her heels, instantly drawing her plasma blade, a sharp energy weapon that flickered with a dangerous blue glow. But she was met with only silence. Slowly, her eyes adjusted to the dim light. She wasn't alone. A figure stood just out of her reach, his glowing eyes narrowing in on her. "Zara Uvri," a voice called out from the darkness. "I knew you'd come." Zara tensed. The voice was unmistakable. It was him. Ren'tal, the one responsible for the abduction. Zara's blood boiled at the sound of his name. This was the man who had orchestrated the entire operation, the mastermind behind the kidnapping of the children. She had heard of his ruthlessness before, but seeing him in person sent a wave of fury through her veins. He was as tall as any Goliath soldier, his face cold and calculating, his eyes gleaming with arrogance. "I should have known you'd be involved," Zara hissed, stepping closer, her blade crackling with energy. "You're a monster, Havoc." He stepped forward, his hands clasped behind his back. "You misunderstand, Zara. I'm not a monster. I'm a scientist. I'm doing what needs to be done." "What needs to be done?" Zara spat, her voice low and dangerous. "You're experimenting on children. You think that's necessary?" Ravok's lips curled into a slight smile, one that sent a chill through Zara's spine. You don't understand, do you? These children are far more than you could ever imagine. Their DNA holds the key to the future. Zara's mind raced. DNA, the experimentation, the whispers of strange, forbidden technologies. It was all beginning to make sense. You're using them as test subjects. Ravok didn't deny it. Instead, he gave a nod. The Goliath need to evolve, Zara. We need to transcend. These children are the key to our future, and you're too blind to see that. Zara's grip on her blade tightened. You're insane, she stepped forward, ready to strike. But Ravok merely chuckled, stepping back into the shadows. It's not just about you anymore, Zara. It's too late to stop us. Zara Uvri didn't have time to waste. The hum of her cloaked ship had been silent in the void, but now as she docked there was an eerie stillness. The research station loomed ahead, an enormous, cold silhouette against the stars. The docking port she'd chosen was unguarded for the moment, allowing her just the sliver of time she needed to prepare. Even though her every instinct screamed at her to act quickly, she took a steadying breath and focused. If she moved too hastily, there was a very real chance she'd alert the Goliath guards stationed on this facility. That would end this mission before it even had a chance to begin. Zara stood up from her pilot's seat, her mind sharp and resolute. She couldn't afford hesitation, not now. She was here for one thing and one thing only, to free the children the Goliath had so callously imprisoned. She had no time to spare, no patience for anything but success. They were waiting. Those innocent lives, trapped in a web spun by the Goliath, had been her concern from the moment she'd received the tip from her contact, a former Goliath scientist who had defected. The information had come at a high price, but Zara was willing to pay. She wasn't one to shy away from danger, not when it came to this. No one, not even the Goliath, had the right to take innocent lives, to warp them for some twisted cause. Zara adjusted her sleek black armor and activated the cloaking field around her suit. The equipment was sophisticated, silent, and nearly undetectable. It was made to let her slip in unnoticed, just the way she liked it. Before she exited the ship, she scanned the area one last time. The station's automated security systems would be on high alert. It was standard procedure. These stations, located in obscure parts of space like the Hades sector, were meant to be impenetrable. They were far too important to the Goliath's operations to risk any infiltration, especially by someone like Zara. She was well aware of the risks. She could be walking into a trap, but she wouldn't let fear stop her now. Her ship was safely docked at the back of the facility, tucked away in a blind spot from the security systems. She knew the guards wouldn't think to check here. The perfect entry point. Zara moved swiftly, her boots soundless against the cold metal floors of the docking bay as she made her way toward the back corridors. She had to find the holding cells where the children were being kept. There were no blueprints of the station available to her, but she knew the layout of Goliath installations. Every facility had a central hub for containment. No matter how technologically advanced or cruel, the cells would be there, somewhere at the heart of the station. Her heart thudded with urgency. Every step she took brought her closer to those kids. As Zara navigated deeper into the station, the corridors grew narrower and more complex. This station was a labyrinth, a reflection of its creator's obsessive need for control and secrecy. Cold light from flickering overhead bulbs bathed the passages in a dull, sterile glow, making everything feel even more desolate. The walls hummed with the whir of machinery, and faint mechanical voices echoed through the halls, adding to the eerie atmosphere. Despite the stark, empty silence, Zara knew that the Goliath were always listening. They had perfected surveillance systems designed not only to see but to hear every whisper, every subtle movement. Her own heart beat loudly in her ears, the rhythm echoing in the hollow spaces around her. She pushed through the internal panic, reminding herself why she was here. For them. The children. Zara clenched her jaw and focused. They had to be here somewhere near the center of the station. It didn't take long for her scanner to pick up life signs, human life signs. She hesitated, her breath caught in her chest as she glanced at the display, confirming her deepest fears. 12 kids, trapped in separate containment cells, their life signs faint. The readings indicated that they were not just being imprisoned, they were being subjected to something else entirely, something that altered their physiological state. The system readings showed faint energy signatures, energy fields interacting with their bodies. Their biological data was being tampered with. The lives of these children, their futures, were being altered in ways she could not even begin to understand. If the Goliath succeeded in whatever they were doing, these kids might never return to their homes. They might be changed beyond recognition. The thought of it made Zara sick to her core. She moved quickly, heading toward the central hub of the station, her steps now more determined. Each second counted. The facility was built to be an impenetrable fortress, but Zara had the advantage of knowing how the Goliath thought. She had studied their tactics, their operations. They believed in control, absolute control. But Zara understood the importance of saving those kids, no matter the cost. The central hub of the station came into view as Zara rounded the last corner. It was more of a complex than a simple control center. Tall, heavily armored doors protected it, with thick walls embedded with advanced shielding technology that would be nearly impossible to breach without the right access codes. Zara had anticipated this. She had spent years preparing for a mission like this, gathering intel from every source she could. The Goliath were predictable in some ways. All Zara needed was the right code to access the main control panel. With a series of swift keystrokes on her wrist console, the door unlocked with a satisfying click. Inside, the room was dimly lit, the walls lined with an array of terminal screens. The heart of the station's operations, the control room, was dominated by a central holographic display. A map of the facility was projected above a glass table, with red markers indicating the locations of the security measures and containment areas. Zara studied it quickly, knowing that the children were being held at Level 3, a high-security level, on the lower floors. But she was not alone. Her presence had been detected. A low hum buzzed in the air, and before she could react, the lights in the control room flickered. A voice echoed from the comm system. "Zara Yuvri, I knew you'd come." The voice was smooth, cold, a voice that sent a chill up her spine. It was one she had hoped to avoid, but she had known that sooner or later she would have to face him. Havoc, the mastermind behind the Goliath's operations. He had been the one who orchestrated the abduction of the children. Havoc was a Goliath strategist, an officer with no moral compass, someone who would go to any lengths to advance his people's ambitions. His cold ambition was matched only by his arrogance. He had been waiting for this moment. Zara's eyes narrowed as she reached for the blade on her hip. There was no turning back now. "Where are they, Havoc?" Zara demanded, her voice steady but sharp, betraying nothing of the fury that burned inside her. She stepped forward, keeping her eyes on the control panel ahead of her. Every piece of equipment she saw was designed for one thing: containment, torture, experimentation. There was no mistaking it. The Goliath had crossed every line of decency. "You don't understand, do you, Zara?" Havoc's voice sounded amused, a slight sneer in his tone. "You think that by saving these children you're somehow doing the right thing? You're wrong. This is necessary. The Goliath will ascend. We will evolve. And these children? They are the key." Zara's hand tightened around the hilt of her blade. She was beyond reasoning with him. beyond trying to understand his warped views. You're using them as lab rats. You're experimenting on children. You call that evolution? Havoc chuckled darkly. You've always been too sentimental, Zara. You could have been part of something greater, but you chose a side, and now you'll die for it. Before Zara could react, a pair of heavily armed Goliath soldiers appeared from behind the terminal panels. They were towering, their faces masked in armor, and their weapons gleamed menacingly in the dim light. Zara's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't hesitate. She wasn't about to back down now. With a fluid motion, she ignited her plasma blade, the blue glow lighting up the dim room like a streak of lightning. The soldiers lunged at her in unison, their weapons raised, but Zara was faster. She spun, her blade cutting through the air with deadly precision. The first soldier's weapon was knocked from his hands with a swift strike, and he crumpled to the floor in defeat. The second soldier tried to strike, but Zara sidestepped, using the momentum to land a clean blow across his chest. He gasped, falling backward, his armor sparking as the energy blast from her blade fried his circuits. He collapsed, incapacitated. Zara turned back to Havoc, her fury uncontainable. She knew that she had to act fast. The children were still trapped. She couldn't let him stop her, not now. "You'll never win," she spat, stepping closer to him. Havoc's smile faltered for a brief moment, but he regained his composure quickly. "It's too late, Zara. You're too late." Zara's grip on her blade tightened as she made her final move toward the holding area. She had come this far. There was no going back now. The control room had gone silent. Havoc's smug smile had all but disappeared, replaced by a grim determination as Zara advanced. Her blue plasma blade hummed with a steady, almost soothing energy as it cut through the air. Her pulse was steady, but underneath that calm surface, the reality of her mission weighed heavily on her shoulders. She was about to make a choice, one that could either secure the future of the children or cost them their lives. Havoc had underestimated her. That was his first mistake. He thought he could intimidate Zara Yuvri, that he could use his position and the power of the Goliath to sway her. But she was no ordinary opponent. She had been trained for this, had lived her life at the edge of danger, and knew the stakes all too well. Her sharp eyes never left him as she moved, each step deliberate, each motion practiced. The plasma blade flickered with a soft hum, illuminating her path. The sharp tang of ozone hung in the air where she'd just struck down the two soldiers. Their bodies lay in a heap, the glowing remnants of their armor sizzling against the cold metallic floor. "You'll never leave this station alive," Havoc sneered. "You're already too late, Zara. The children are no longer human. They are a new breed. They are ours." Zara didn't flinch at his words. He was so consumed with his own delusions of grandeur that he didn't realize he was speaking to someone who'd seen it all before. She had faced people like him, madmen who thought they could reshape the universe in their image, and she'd seen them all fall. "New breed or not, they're still children," Zara shot back. "And they don't belong to you." Her words cut through the tension like a blade itself, as the room stood still in an eerie silence. Havoc's face twisted in anger, the sharp lines of his features growing taut. "You don't understand what we're doing here, do you?" His voice was a venomous hiss now, his composure cracking for the first time since Zara had walked into the control room. "We are evolving humanity, Zara. The Goliath need the human race to transcend, to become something more. I've been entrusted with this mission, and I will not let anyone stand in my way." Zara's lips curled into a bitter smile. "Transcend? You're just using them as experiments. You'll never get away with this." Her fingers flexed around the hilt of her blade, but just as she was about to strike, Hawke held up a hand. "You can't stop it, Zara. You'll see. I've activated the containment field. The children are beyond your reach. All you'll find there now is failure." Zara froze. Her mind instantly raced back to the data she had seen earlier. The life signs of the children, faint and flickering, that wasn't the worst part. There had been energy readings in their cells. Something had been altering them on a genetic level. Whatever Hawke had done, it was irreversible. Her mind screamed with frustration. She had to get to them. She had to stop whatever he was doing. Without warning, she spun on her heel, her boots echoing sharply as she ran toward the central doorway leading to the containment chambers. The door slid open with a faint hiss, revealing a darkened corridor beyond, lined with heavy security doors that seemed to pulse with a subtle, dangerous energy. Her senses were on high alert as she approached the first door, but a quiet warning chirped from her wrist console. The display indicated that the containment grid had been activated, which meant the children were now under even tighter security. It also meant she had limited time. If Hawke had truly activated the system, it was a matter of minutes before the station would go into lockdown, and she would be trapped. Zara quickly bypassed the station's security systems. Thankfully, she'd done her research. She had anticipated this moment. With a few swift taps on her wrist pad, the doors slid open, revealing the first of many holding cells. Inside, a soft, glowing light bathed the chamber, revealing the shape of a child. Their small, fragile form lay on a metallic slab, their eyes closed, their bodies surrounded by intricate neural interfaces and cables. Zara's heart sank. She had seen things like this before. Experiments, modifications, but never with children. The sight of their innocence caught in this grotesque web made her feel the weight of the galaxy itself pressing down on her chest. She stepped forward, the whirring hum of the equipment drowning out all other sounds as her fingers brushed over the neural interface. The device responded with a low beep. Zara quickly overrode the lock. She wasn't sure what had been done to the child, if they were even conscious of what had been happening, but she wasn't about to let this continue. Zara stepped back as the chamber's door hissed open, allowing her to move closer to the child. She gently lifted the child's limp form from the slab. The child was human, no older than 7 or 8, with dark brown hair and a pale face. The child's breathing was shallow, and a faint pulse flickered on the medical monitors. She checked their pulse, breathing a silent sigh of relief. Alive, at least. But there was something else, something she hadn't expected. The child's body was too still, too controlled. Their heartbeat was irregular, and there were strange blue veins running across their arms, pulsing with a faint light. "They've been altered." Hawke wasn't lying. These children were no longer entirely human. Whatever the Goliath had done, it was more than just experimentation. It was transformation, a genetic alteration. Zara couldn't fathom the exact nature of it, but her stomach twisted at the thought. She quickly secured the child in her arms and moved toward the next cell. Time was running out. She had to hurry. As Zara passed through the dimly lit hallway toward the next room, she could hear faint murmurs, the low hum of the station's systems beginning to power up for the lockdown. It wasn't much longer before Hawke's prophecy would come true. She would be trapped in this nightmare with no way to escape. Her fingers danced over the controls again, unlocking the next chamber. This time, as the door slid open, she was met with the bright, fearful eyes of another child, a girl probably no older than 6. She was staring straight at Zara, wide-eyed, almost as though she had been waiting for her. Zara paused. The girl's eyes were filled with both confusion and fear, but they were also sharp. aware of her surroundings, as if she knew that someone was coming for her. "Hey," Zara whispered, crouching down to meet her eye level. "I'm here to get you out. Can you walk?" The girl didn't answer right away. Her eyes darted around the room, taking in the stark white walls, the metallic fixtures, the looming security cameras, before looking back at Zara with a hint of distrust. "My name is Zara. You're safe now. You just need to come with me." The girl's lips trembled. They're watching us." Zara nodded. "I know, but we have to leave before they lock this place down. Can you stand?" The girl hesitated, her tiny hands gripping the edge of the bed-like surface she had been confined to. Slowly she sat up. The girl's legs wobbled as she stood on unsteady feet, but she managed. Zara's breath hitched in her throat. The girl's limbs seemed too rigid, her movements stiff, as though her muscles had been conditioned to behave differently. What had they done to her? There was no time to investigate. Zara had to focus on getting them out. With the girl now safely by her side, Zara moved quickly to the next chamber, her eyes scanning every corner of the facility. She couldn't risk being spotted. They were turning them into something else, something unnatural. Zara clenched her jaw. She couldn't let these monsters win. The Goliath had already gone too far, and if Havoc thought he could escape the consequences of his actions, he was gravely mistaken.